In this story, you'll hear about a husband who gave his wife exactly what she asked for, and then made her regret it in silence. Suppose I had to have suspicions when my wife came home from work in the art gallery for the first time, celebrating the new patron. But when you fully trust someone and she hasn't worried you in the 17 years you've been together, your first instinct is to give her a little relaxation. My name is Bobby Scree, and my wife's name is Tracy. We met at the tiny University of the Midwest 18 years ago, and we got to know each other. Married 16 years ago, we had a daughter 14 years ago, and we had a son 12 years ago. I work as a programmer at a state institution, and I make good but not a lot of money. I was successful enough that Tracy was able to be a housewife and mother when the kids were young. But 2 years ago, she decided that the kids were old enough to move out and got a job at the city's prestigious art gallery for 30 hours a week. She studied art in college, so when it came to her intellectually, this was by no means a problem. We live in a big city in the Middle West, and there were a lot of people with such a high level of wealth that the gallery could run a successful business. As a bonus of his work, Tracy was able to talk to these people and briefly immerse himself in their world before going back to his one-day life. From time to time, both of us had entered their worlds because Tracy occasionally organized a sizable exhibition in the gallery. Gallery and I could go along with it as a +1. I have to say that it was thrilling to spend a few hours with some powerful people. Computer enthusiasts like me frequently have to speak with politicians, business executives, lawyers, and bank presidents. As a result, Tracy occasionally returned home with excitement after meeting a celebrity or someone influential. I liked how she simply cruised around the house for a while before we left her road, when reality set in, and we realized where she fit into the picture. Not one of the best things about Tracy is that her kids are usually dispersed throughout their rooms, leaving me until the end of the night to deal with the brunt of her scathing remarks about our lives. For the most part, I just handled it coolly. However, over the past few weeks, Tracy has been talking about a brilliant real estate genius who recently started visiting the gallery frequently, Jackson Alawi's Yes Fairchild, a 28-year-old millionaire, who recently moved into a fancy new home and wanted his in general. Trace said that she was impressed by him, even though she implied that he appeared to be somewhat preoccupied with himself in various conversations. She described him as attractive and well-complex, and frequently discussed various physical activities like cycling and climbing. Tracy boasting about the new patron was not out of the ordinary, so I didn't give it much thought and let her talk for the next 2 weeks before it subsided. I must admit that Jackson Aloysia Fairchild was an impressive physical example, measuring about 6 to 2,190, and in his Armani road suit, he looked solid. He was also blonde, blue-eyed, and extremely beautiful. Even in my tired opinion, I did not quite expect this, and I did not hear anything about him until I was introduced to him at the Christmas Gala concert in the gallery just a few weeks before the holiday. We spoke for about 30 seconds while Tracy was representing us, and during that brief time I noticed that he looks at my wife like a tie from head to toe. Yes, she looked amazing this evening in a blue skirt and jacket, with a tiny hint of the neckline showing through the white blouse, but his eyes were more like a smile than admiration. Tracy seemed too preoccupied with everything going on to notice, but I did, and she went to talk. At the bar, I made a portion of Jack Daniels with ice and found Kenny Taylor, the husband of one of my wife's co-workers whom I had previously met and got along with. Very well. We talked about cars and sports. After an hour or so, I noticed Tracy talking to someone in a small group of people and Jackson Aloysius Fairchild wrapping it around. I went to the bar, got her favorite drink, and went to the group. I introduced myself and gave Tracy a glass of wine. Then, without saying anything, I reached for Tracy's right thigh and took Jackson's hand that was lying there behind her. He just smiled at me and put his hand back to his. After making sure Jackson wasn't pursuing her, I anticipated seeing Tracy going about his business while I spoke with some of her co-workers. However, after an hour or so, I didn't see my wife anywhere, and when I looked around a second time, I didn't see Jackson either. My spider-like feelings weren't just tingling. So I tried everything to find Tracy but couldn't find her in the gallery. So I went through the front door and I saw a couple sitting comfortably in the black Jaguar XJ car, and I didn't bother to check if it was Trace and Jackson. I suggested that it was, and I went to the car and opened the door next to the woman. The passengers jumped up to this so that everything I could install was that if they didn't kiss, they were approaching this. There were small groups of people, in coats in the parking lot, and it seemed like they were about to leave, but Tracy wasn't there yet. I said, "It's time to go, dear," in my most courteous but firm voice. We were just trading mutterings when Jackson smiled at me. "I don't care," I said just above a whisper. "You have to come and listen to this sound system, Jackson. This is absolutely crystal." The stereo system was included, and Jackson played some sort of concert music, but I don't think that one of them listened to music another time. "It's really time for us to go," I said, using my most evasive voice. I took my wife out of the vehicle, and we proceeded to the location where my Ford F-150 was parked. I asked, "I can't leave yet. The party has 2 more hours. It is expected that I will stay here for all this time and will be one of the mistresses." And Tracy said, "If your boss has problems with this, he can call me directly." I replied, "And what the hell do you think? Did we really listen to the audio system of his car? This is amazing," with a note of trepidation in her voice. "Yes," I replied, but Tracy kept acting like she did. Be innocent. But the next few weeks, between us were cool. Eventually, though, I felt better and everything went back to normal. So a few months later, I was shocked to hear from Tracy that I had accepted the invitation to spend the weekend at Jackson's cottage by the lake on July 4th. We went on Friday afternoon and stayed until noon on Sunday, where Jackson prepared meals for us both days, provided a full bar, a swimming pool, a boat, and everything else that was available. I started to object, but Tracy just said that we were doing this, turned around, and left me. In fact, the weekend started off perfectly. We spent several hours on Lake Jackson's rather large sailboat, where all the women looked amazing in bikinis and the guys at least looked decent in loose-fitting costumes. In fact, Jackson may have had the best body of the 5 guys, but fortunately it did not seem to hang better than the rest of us. And Trace, despite being the second oldest of the 5 women, was in his cottage's backyard. Jackson had a really well-equipped grill, and there was even a completely clogged refrigerator with beer, wine, and ice for cocktails. He brought pickled steaks and started to fry them on the grill while everyone was sitting on chairs next to the grill area with a drink of their choice. Jackson was a kind master who still cared for Tracy, who seemed to hold on to him a little. I thought that her black bikini showed her 36C and a round ass without showing too much skin. More than Christmas, the night went smoothly, and at midnight, Jackson, feeling lonely, went to the main bedroom. On Saturday, we started with a trip to a small town by the lake, which was a tourist trap with lots of cute shops. Most women came home with a few things, and we had a lavish lunch from heroic sandwiches before a volleyball match started. After the lesson, the libations started, and in the evening, the grill prepared sausage and grated cheese. After we finished another delicious meal and sat for a few hours enjoying the breeze, Boss Tracy Lou asked him and me to take a walk around the lake. Considering everything we had eaten and consumed, I thought it would be a great idea to get ready for the second round. It took us about half an hour to get around the lake, and when we got back, the group moved from the table to chairs and skids logs. I wasn't thrilled to see Tracy sitting in a deck chair with my back to Jackson, and his hands clasped around his. Priest smiled and got up with Jackson, but it didn't seem like she was in a rush, even though she knew it wouldn't be pleasant because she never really looked into my eyes. Instead, she came up and sat next to me for the majority of the evening, and I noticed how she and Jackson looked at each other multiple times when they thought I didn't look like the previous night, around midnight, when the party started to change its focus. However, while the other 3 pairs went to their bedrooms, Tracy discreetly invited me to join her in the kitchen when we arrived. We all know parents who live their lives through their children, and when the children leave home, parents truly have nothing in common. Marcus Rothstein had to explain to me twice that my options were actually limited. Either refuse half of his and my children, or wait for it for the sake of the children, and then refuse half of mine if we divorce as soon as they are born. I cried quietly, but I didn't care. The following week, I scheduled an appointment with a reputable divorce lawyer, but the meeting was, to put it mildly, not very good, and they are no longer together. In fact, my lawyer wrote a script that called for me to be superpowered for the next 6 years and then to divorce Tracy as soon as the kids stopped being an issue. In my case, I didn't have to worry about Tracy's management because if she told me the truth about how to keep her promise, I did it. If my kids were involved in any event, I was usually a responsible parent and made sure Tracy participated as well. Why should I be the only one who has to take part in the fundraising process? As for the physical side, I refrained from touching Tracy sexually for 6 months until she told me that she would have to leave if I did not want to fulfill her male responsibilities because I was willing to put a nut in myself. I was able to convince myself that I could have sex with Tracy just as she did with Jackson, which was just sex and nothing more. In the end, she was still a beautiful woman, and I was not forced to have sex with the troll. Very nice, but our first night in the saddle set the tone for what was to happen over the next few years. We went on a date to one of our favorite Italian restaurants, and I gave Tracy 2 more glasses of wine than usual. "Where the hell came from?" she whispered to me. "Damn it, Bobby. I'll have to wait another 6 months to repeat the performance." I couldn't respond, so he pressed against her back and said nothing. I admit that every time I thought about Tracy with Jackson, I got angry. Classes weren't gentle, and then it wasn't even love. It was just pure sex. But she seemed to enjoy herself and never complained. After that, we didn't hug or talk gently as much as we had before the incident, so it seemed like everything would return to normal. However, within a week of every month, I hired a private investigator to follow her, to make sure she kept her word and wasn't going to see Jackson or anyone else. I spent a lot of money to get some peace of mind. Since Terry was only a freshman and lived in the campus dorm, Tracy and I assisted him in moving a week before classes began. Neither Tracy nor I remembered that they took half of what Terry took, but 16 years prior to that, you made me a vow that you simply threw in the trash that night. Years later, our youngest child, Terry, went to study at the College of Michigan. Melissa studied in Michigan, so when Terry made a decision, we fought a little war between the kids all summer before they both parted ways. She croaked, "I felt like Lou had just finished the circle you started at the lake house 6 years ago. And as far as cruelty goes, your Sunday morning sex with all of us in the house was the most humiliating moment of my life. I bet got revenge. Told you not to do it then, but we're going to do it anyway, and threatened me with the fact that they took my children. I couldn't let you do that, and ordered me to be served in the gallery in front of Lou and all my colleagues. 6 years ago, she told me that she thought having sex was worth it. Do you still feel that way? I kept my promise to you, and for 6 years I was totally faithful." She complained. "So how did you exaggerate your promise?" I quickly replied, "If your vow was only valid for 16 years, would your promise be valid for half that period, say 8 years, Bobby? I'm really sorry if this incident leads to our divorce, but I told you that you didn't cheat. And yes, you did. You broke your promise to me. And although you regret the divorce it caused, you never regret the action you took. I didn't give you a hall pass because we haven't come to an agreement that you can get one. You just gave it to yourself and decided that I would accept your foolish decision. Tracy, you tore my heart out that weekend and you're on the way. And just because you told me this in advance rather than skulking around behind my back doesn't make it right." Tracy got herself a good lawyer and he persuaded the judge that we needed couples counseling at the first session. The consultant, a pretty young woman of about 30, asked me why I couldn't get over Tracy cheating on me just once, especially since she didn't go behind my back or sleep with Jackson. I looked at her as if she had 2 heads. At home, you told me it was my problem and I needed to deal with it or you would take my kids. It looks like love to you, but it doesn't to me. Then, I asked her if she had ever been married. She said, "My marital status has nothing to do with your answer, Mr. Sprague," which was more than defensive. I said, getting ready to leave, but as I was leaving, both women sat still. Later that night, I got a call from Ron and Judy Tracy's parents. I loved my parents very much, and after they passed away a few years ago, I grew closer to them. They responded to my love with warmth, but I knew that in this case they must support their daughter. It's just what parents do. I haven't spoken to them since Tracy was released a few weeks ago. They were on the line speakerphone when Judy began the conversation. After the greeting, Bobby asked, "Why must you be so tough about this?" She said, "You know Tracy loves you with all your heart, and she kept her promise to you that you will never have sex with anyone else again." I asked, "Well, honey," and she replied that you two spoke. About half of the story is that she had sex with a guy one night and then promised to be faithful to you forever. She told us this instead of skulking around behind your back like she could because she truly loves you and doesn't want to lose you. Mom, are you two sitting? Say whatever you want to say, Bobby. Her father gave us a brief response, but we didn't discuss her having sex with Jackson Aloysia Fairchild. She and Jackson talked about how she would take the kids and turn them against me. The rest of us sat in the living room to start before your daughter got too loud, so we moved to the backyard. I had never been so embarrassed in my life until I went home and Tracy told me how wonderful the sex was. Does this look like a loving wife? Does this sound like someone who really doesn't care about her husband? This isn't true for me, but you lived with her. I warned her not to do this, but it didn't make the slightest difference. For 6 more years, she asked her father. No, I lived with the kids for 6 more years, and eventually I even went back to your daughter. But love died that night and continues to die a little every day. I will never love her as much as I once did. Ron said, "We didn't know the whole story, so we should have realized that it would have been worse for you to just leave. Thank you for staying for the kids for all these years," as Tracy and her lawyer did everything they could to prolong the divorce, which took around being an involved parent, while my kids were growing up, really supported my standing in social circles, and gave me a glimpse into the personal lives of some other parents. I got to know a lot more divorces in my age group than usual, and used that knowledge to my advantage when divorce finally became official. I don't know, maybe Tracy decided that I would lose the desire to fight and stay married. She should have known this wouldn't happen, but I didn't realize it at the time. The old saying goes, if someone is willing to look, everything will be found as true. In fact, I had more sex and with more partners than before I got married, even though I moved into a 3-bedroom apartment because I wanted my kids to have a place to stay with me if and when I got divorced. I also frequently went to dance clubs on the weekends and almost always had an interesting conversation partner. Many of them were divorced mothers of friends, my children, and others were friends of I hoped that he and Tracy would reach some sort of agreement, but I had no intention of mediating that deal. Tracy had wronged all 3 of us, and I wasn't going to make it any easier for her to reintegrate into the kids' lives. I knew that they were initially upset with Tracy after the divorce, but I assumed that they would eventually move on and perhaps divide time between the 2 of us until they left for good. I didn't hear much from Tracy's parents during the proceedings, which I completely understood, but about 2 months after the divorce was finalized, Judy called and asked if I could join her and Ron for dinner at a Maggiano Italian restaurant in our city. Since we had gotten along so well before the divorce, I didn't see why I shouldn't go, and the 3 of us had a great evening. However, the evening started off rocky as Ron and Judy apologized for Tracy's actions and for any resentment that might have resulted from their support of her. The evening improved from there, despite the occasional remarks and tears about what could have been. I think having Ron and Judy back in my life gave me a better sense of normalcy, and I think they enjoyed my company as much as I enjoyed theirs. We hardly ever discussed Tracy except when we were recalling a past event, at least until they found out the rest of the story. So I told them that the apology was accepted and that I understood that they were supporting their daughter. Amy and I began dating about 18 months after our divorce, and at the time, I wasn't really looking for Miss Right. On Saturday night, when Amy and her friends entered the restaurant where the kids and I were having dinner, she and 3 of her friends were seated just a table away from me, even though I didn't see them. We probably got together a few times a month while the kids were at school, and when they got home, we were even closer. It was only a matter of time before I introduced a 6th person into our little get-togethers. Pay close attention to them, because my kids were the best. "Hey, Dad, do you see those women who just sat down?" Melissa asked herself. "They all look good, and 3 of them aren't wearing wedding rings." "Jesus, Melissa, I don't need you to be my assistant," I said. "She's right, Dad," I said. "There's some power on the table," Terry added. I looked around and the kids said, "Maybe I really need you as my assistant." I told Melissa that after we finished dinner, I drove, so I handed Melissa the keys to the car and told the kids that I would look for a house in Uber then. The long-haired, blonde Jennifer sitting at my round table at 10 hours asked me, "What kind of father are you?" "I'm a father who knows his kids have good taste. So when they noticed that 3 of you weren't wearing wedding rings, I had 2 options. Come here and maybe make a proposal, or go home and watch a baseball game and get bullied by the same kids." I walked over and introduced myself to a table of lovely ladies who immediately invited me to join them while they ate. I sipped Eagle Rare bourbon. Complete ass of yourself, but at least get more respect from the kids, and they always told me that it was just as easy to love a beautiful stepmother as it was to love an ugly one. "Wow. What a thing you have going on." Big guy said, "The married brunette at my place too, eh? Not a jerk, just a confident guy with 2 smart, chatty kids and good taste, I might add. So are you the teacher here?" They all giggled. Even Rose, who I was picking on so big. "Guy, you tell your story to the class first," she replied with a smile, so I told 4 near strangers the Reader's Digest version of my life, quickly recounting my former 17-year marriage and subsequent divorce. Not good enough. "Romeo, if you were such a wonderful guy, how did your wife run away?" asked Angelica, the black-haired goddess at my 8 bus. "There are 3 of us here who have gone through the divorce process, so we want to know in advance whether we should even waste time talking to you straight." "I like it," replied. "For the first time since I got divorced 2 years ago, I laid out my entire story, even the most painful parts. Up to this point, Tracy's parents and my divorce lawyer were the only people who knew the entire story." It was awkwardly quiet, and when I finished telling it, I noticed tears in everyone's eyes. Damn, I was crying too. That's one way to ruin a room. Carol touched my right arm and said, "I'm so sorry. I try not to dwell on the past. Look on the bright side. I got 2 wonderful kids out of the deal, and my in-laws aren't too bad either. Your relatives must be kidding me, Angelique. I'm special, and no one loves their in-laws that much, especially after a divorce. If you're done eating, here's a drink. For me. Then it's my turn to hear your stories." I said we sat like that for 3 more rounds until I'd heard everyone's stories. Jennifer got divorced because her husband was a serial cheater. Angelique and Carol's marriage ended because of irreconcilable differences. And Rose has been married to the best husband in the world for 26 years. She has referred to him as such on multiple occasions, and each time the other 3 nodded their heads in agreement, saying, "This is the person I need to meet." The women informed me that they were having a bachelorette party once a month, so my presence was somewhat against the rules for Rose. But they also suggested that if she could bring her husband to the next walk, I could come too if I wanted to. The other 3 immediately agreed, so I boldly asked, "Can I bring a date?" A month later, the 6 of us were gathered at the same restaurant, and I was able to meet Sean Rose's husband. When we first met, I thought he might be the greatest husband in the world. We instantly established a common language, and the 6 of us continued to go out to eat every month. I also started to see the 3 unmarried women as good friends. Sometimes the 4 of us would go out together, and other times I would go on a date with one of the women. Some of the dates ended with us making love, and other times we had sex. Regardless of how we ended up doing it, I made sure that each of them received my best effort, including making sure I was constantly hitting the woman. I think I'm pretty good at it, and based on the screaming orgasms I got from all three of them, I think the women really enjoyed it. After a year or so, Angelica and I became exclusive. Jennifer and Carol were still good friends, but everyone involved understood that this was what exclusivity meant, even though the banter between the girls could occasionally get a little rough. When they got together, my kids also quickly grew accustomed to Angelica, which took her in-laws a little. Having a permanent girlfriend meant that their waning hopes of Tracy and I reconciling were swiftly dashed, but I believe they saw the same thing in Angelique, and since we clicked so well, I believe it was only a matter of time until they felt at ease with her and began demonstrating to her why I think so highly of them. After Angelica had spoken to the in-laws about 6 times, Judy pulled me away from the others and told me we needed to talk. Bobby, I may not have the right to say this, but it's too bad I'm saying it anyway. She started by asking how long you've been dating this woman. Don't you think it's time to put a ring on her finger before anyone else gets such a brilliant idea? I did my best to match her serious expression, but I was grinning from ear to ear. When your ex-mother-in-law saw this, I suppose she was right. Your mom. I need to. About 6 weeks later, I took Angelica back to Maggiano for her 47th birthday. I encouraged her to dress up for the occasion and saw her version of a little black dress because she couldn't get pregnant, had no pregnancies, and her body looked like a 35-year-old girl with her stomach still toned and her breasts not sagging. It wasn't just that she didn't have children, though, because she also spent a lot of time at the gym. During dinner, we both ordered cheesecake for dessert, and our waiter returned with a tray with 2 slices and a bottle of champagne. We didn't order champagne, Angelique whispered to me. But I did, and I whispered back, "This is for drinking right after I put this ring on your finger." She was dressed above her knees, with the front cut out to display some of her gorgeous 36C measurements. My head was spinning all night, and I barely stopped drooling during dinner. I think he did a great job making me a custom diamond engagement ring, and apparently so did Angelique, who began crying as soon as she saw it. I'm pretty sure there was a yes somewhere in the middle of all the crying. We had a simple spring wedding, and Terry was my best man and Rose Angelique's matron of honor. No, I didn't invite Tracy, even though I know it hurt Ron and Judy. I didn't think of my ex-wife as a friend, and the only time we were together was when it had to do with the kids. We were friendly when we were together, but not like some people can go through a divorce and become friends. That won't happen with me. I couldn't forget the disrespect, and if you don't, I don't think you're really forgiving. My kids eventually forgave Tracy, and I'm fine with that because she's their mother. But I don't ask about her, and my kids don't give me information about her. Similarly, with Ron and Judy, Angelica seemed to get along well with Tracy when we were all together. This is acceptable to me because Angelique is her own person and can decide who she wants to be friends with again. Got together twice after the wedding, first at Melissa's and then at Terry's. In both cases, I was a very proud father who refused to let anything ruin my children's special days. A few years after they were married, I saw Angelique, who I never saw coming. Tracy and I were thrilled to become grandparents, and Granny Angel was thrilled as well. It seemed that she had a bad mother itch that needed to be scratched, so to speak, and her grandchildren helped make up the difference. I don't have to promise you that I made a vow to you, but Angelica told me that she thought Tracy was searching for a different version of me but couldn't find her. She wanted me to promise her that I would never leave her. Bill was completely ridiculous. Tracy eventually remarried, and they got divorced again. He then got married a 3rd time, and they got divorced a 3rd time. Thanks for watching. What do you think about how everything turned out? Let me know in the comments. I'm really curious to hear your take. And if you enjoy true relationship stories, feel free to subscribe. More are coming soon.